And we are now, I believe that we're on Facebook Live now. Hey, everybody, this is my first Facebook Live. And I'm so excited to be doing it today with Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum. We're going to give it a couple minutes so that we can be sure that everybody gets on. And I had said that people were going to be able to ask questions. I have to figure out how to be able to do that. I'm not quite sure because I can't see it on this screen. So we're going to wangle something away. Anyway, one other thing. Do you like my pink beat headphones?
I think they're awesome.
Do you like them? Anyone who wants to knock my headphones, here's the deal. When you're stuck at home and you got teenage daughters who left the house, this is what you're using. So I kind of rock it, and the pink is happy. But the whole point today, so here's why we're talking today and why I've got Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum from Hawaii. I woke him up early to be talking about COVID and the confusion. Every day I get up and the headlines are more extreme. They talk about the curve is bending, which our goal was to bend the curve. And they talk about fewer people are getting in the hospital, fewer people are contracting the disease, even though testing is up. So that's great news. Meanwhile, the governors have us now, they're saying more people have to wear face masks no matter where you are outside of the house. So they're putting even more restrictions on, and yet there's progress going on. We've got people talking about whether or not you should, whether or not we'll even get out before there's a vaccine, whether or not there are treatments available. The treatments are dangerous, the treatments are not. So the goal of today was to talk about these treatments and resolve confusion, hopefully put you at ease and let you know that there are options that are out there that, depending on what channel you watch, you're getting an entirely different answer. So Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum, let me just introduce him to you for a second so you know who he is and how great he is. He's a board-certified intern. I have to read it so I get it all right. A board-certified internist, nationally known expert in the fields of chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, sleep, and pain, all of which have elements of anxiety, depression, part of the disease profile. Dr. Teitelbaum has written 10 books, including From Fatigue to Fantastic and Real Causes, Real Cures, which is soon to be published by Bottom Line. And he is an expert on infection. He's an expert on holistic health. Somehow he knows everything. Real Causes, Real Cures has the answers to so many ailments and diseases. That will be out by Bottom Line sometime soon. So Jake, welcome. Thank you officially.
Sarah, aloha, and welcome everybody, because there's so much craziness out there and misinformation about this disease. The reason I'm here today is as a scientist, as somebody who's been a doctor for over 40 years and very, very familiar with these areas, not just the virus, but with the media and the political craziness and how they play in. You're going to understand what's really going on. You don't need to panic. You just need to be cautious and what you need to do to really thrive and do fine through this virus.
So let's start with that, Jake. I mean, in terms of just let's assuage some of the fear, because you've got, again, the numbers they've got. Yesterday they were talking about there were more deaths in Connecticut and in New York than there had been, and yet they're playing a little fast and loose with those numbers. They're assigning deaths to people that didn't necessarily die of COVID. They might have had it, but they died of something else. These 200 deaths in Connecticut yesterday, they actually were a backlog of death certificates. They kind of caught up. And then the headline says 200. So how do we keep people calm on that resolve?
First of all, stop looking at that stuff. Let me give some perspective. You had about 60 to 80,000 people die each year in the United States from just the regular flu. And you're looking at about 100 to 200,000 here. Measles, let's look at hepatitis. Hepatitis kills over 400,000 Americans a year. So every year, year in, year out, twice as many people to 4 times as many people die from hepatitis. Heart disease, 7 to 8 times more likely. So it's not that major a deal. This is not the plague. The plague in Europe killed 1/2 the population. This virus, you're looking at not just less than 1, but less than 1/3 of 1% of the population.
So let me ask you this though, and I was going to talk about it later, but let me ask you this now. In terms of, just to be clear, the mortality rate is going down. Right now, they originally thought that it was like 15%, it was 10%, it was 6%. They don't know because we still don't know how many people have had it. There's so many people that might have had this that never went to the doctor, never got reported. So the arithmetic is off and the deaths are off.
1%.
Right. And this is what there are people that are saying that it's going to be 1% or even less by the time all testing is done.
Well, here's the thing. We had a really wonderful test tube called a cruise ship for what the virus does. It was a closed system. We knew they could test everybody on it pretty much, and 1% of people who got it basically died from it. And this was a population that older people tend to be on cruises. So
right, which is the most vulnerable.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 1% at the upside. And so, if you get it, there's, basically you have less than 1/3 out of 100. I mean, it's basically 1/3 of 1%. It's not a really high number.
Now, let me ask you about this, the contagion. So they're talking about that this is far more contagious than the flu, that the flu, the average person who gets the flu infects 1 to 2 people. They're saying the average person who's getting COVID is infecting 5 to 6 people. But is that simply because this is a new germ so that there's no herd immunity? So people don't have no defenses against it whatsoever?
Well, that's simply because the media wants to scare you to death. Understand that the media's job is not to inform you. Even Mark Twain knew, 100 some years ago when he talked about the news, he said, well, if you don't read the news, you're uninformed. If you do read the news, you're misinformed. And that holds true even today. Thomas Jefferson was even less kind. He said he never read the paper, so it's nonsense.
Well, but so when this is going to come around, this isn't going to come and go. COVID is now going to be part of our life.
We don't
so
know.
when it comes again, pardon?
We don't know because this is the first time for
Right.
it. We don't know if it's going to be seasonal. My guess is that it will be recurrent, but we don't know if it's going to be seasonal or anything like that. But again, you talked about the N naught, of the flu. The flu, if each person has a flu, is likely to get about 2 other people sick. Where with the COVID, they're looking at about 2 to 3 people sick. Those are the most commonly used numbers. If you look at the Imperial College, the main organizations, it's slightly more contagious than the flu. Chickenpox, instead of 3 people, if somebody chickenpox, will get 10 to 12 people sick with chickenpox.
I was hearing them saying like 4 to 6 in terms of the COVID. But again, I wasn't sure if it was because it was new. Nobody has any defenses to it.
There's no herd immunity.
Right.
The flu comes in, it's a new flu, but it's kind of like the old one. Our bodies have learned the tricks for how to fight it. So, less people are contagious, so less likely to get it.
All right. Let's talk about treatments. Because again, I think what's going to reduce the anxiety, they'll talk about vaccines. We'll get to that later. But also if there are treatments right now, everybody feels helpless because there's nothing to treat it. But there's some things that are talked about. There's debate. So the number one, the hydroxychloroquine and the Z-Paks, the antibiotic and the anti-malarial. So there's those who say, and President Trump's been criticized for this, that early tests were looking very positive. And then there are those that say, oh no, it's horribly dangerous because there are side effects and you might get AFib and you might go blind. And it really doesn't work that effectively in people. So truth, please.
Let me give the truth. The truth is, if I had it, I would be taking the Zithromax and Plaquenil in a heartbeat. I would not even be thinking twice about it. It's a no-brainer. Of course you do it. So why the controversy? You have to understand in medicine is a wonderful, uses science. And sometimes it uses science as this wonderful tool. And sometimes it uses it as a religion that's fueled by money. And more often the latter. Science is a wonderful tool, but it's a god-awful religion. So what Fauci is saying is that, and he's a good man, I like him, but he's out of line here. Basically, he's saying unless you have randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled large studies, the thousands of people, we just don't know.
And just to be clear, that's the traditional way that drugs come to market. But
exactly.
Right. But of course, by the time those drugs come to market, to be clear to everybody, those haven't been tested on everybody anyway. They don't know what something's going to fully be like until it's in the marketplace.
And when it comes to the market, what has much more impact on its safety and effectiveness is its profitability. That's a topic for a different thing. So the thing is that look, you're having a new virus, and it would sure be nice to go ahead and take the 2.5 years it takes to properly design and do all these studies, but you don't have that. So he is saying no double-blind studies. He's not saying, well, let's use the data at hand, which is what common sense and science says.
Well, are the
He's,
lawyers also protecting him? Are these
I,
lawyers that are getting in the way of
no,
not wanting it to,
no,
be more
no.
publicly available?
No, it's just that he has this religious belief that until you have double-blind studies. So, for example, if he was sitting in a boat that was taking on water and starting to sink, and they started handing out the life preservers, his way of thinking here, he would be demanding no life preservers. There are no double-blind studies that life preservers work. Stop passing out life preservers. And people say, we know they work. We have, but it's not double-blind studies. He'd be in an airplane going down,
Right.
and he'd say no parachutes or no double-blind. It's exactly like that. There's no difference. It's become a religious statement on his part, not common sense, not science. Science says you take the data you have, you see what it says. And the data we have so far is, and when you run a risk benefit analysis of how likely is it to help you, there's a very high probability that the Plaquenil and Zithromax combination will be life-saving for tens of thousands of people.
And
The
how many studies have there been? There was the France study. Dr. Oz this morning was talking about a study in Shanghai, actually, where it reduced, what did I say? It
the
reduced the
length of
symptoms,
duration.
the length and duration, although I'll
Yes.
call it didn't cure it. So I don't know, it seems like a distinction without a difference, perhaps.
Well, let me give a distinction. So, say you
Right.
have people like you and I, we're doing fine, we get the virus, and we have a little cough. Okay, that's when you want to start it. The risk in that population is very low, and the probability is it'll keep them from being in the hospital and becoming that very sick group. In the very sick group, which was the Shanghai group, the French group, what you see was that it shortened the duration of the symptoms, but very critically, people, instead of being contagious for 22 days, were only contagious for 4 days.
Wow.
Okay, and if you think about what it takes to stop the spread of the virus in the population, we talked about the N naught a little bit, and likelihood of it triggering, and that contributes to when you can come down off a lockdown. It's very important. So, for those of you watching, I want to give you a simple data point that's very clear and really is uncontested. And then knowing that when you read in the news media, have fun with it. So they'll talk about in the news media um, about the Plaquenil can cause vision losses, right? You see this all the time. It can affect the eyes. So here's the simple truth, very clear in the literature. In over 10 million people who have taken Plaquenil short term, as we're envisioning here, there have been 0 cases, and they've been looking closely, 0 cases in 10 million people of vision problems taking it short term. Not ever once.
And
So
even the people that take it long term, those are people with autoimmune diseases, for
they
the
can
most
see it
part, that
after 2 to 5
right.
years, and even then it's uncommon.
Right. And those people, their immune systems are in different situations anyway. Their whole bodies have a different level
In
of
those
defense.
people, you look at the eyes every 6
Right.
months, and if they're starting to show the changes, you stop the medicine in
Right.
those rare cases. There have been 0 cases of it causing vision problems in this population. So if you are reading somewhere in the media that says it can cause vision problems and not taking into account that we're talking short term here, they're doing what is called lying.
Well, how about AFib? Because that's been the other thing that they've talked about.
Well, it's more VTAC, actually. It's
Mhm.
torsades the point. So how about the arrhythmias? Chloroquine taken by itself, short term, has never caused dangerous arrhythmias either. Taken long term for years, you can see rhythm abnormalities, but never in the 6-day course, ever in 10 million people. So you've never seen it for either medication, and it's been looked for, and it's been, and unlike a new drug that's been tested on 2,000 people, this has been tested on over tens of millions of people.
And how about the
So
interaction when they're putting two drugs
that's
together, which you always have to
that's
watch out for?
that's the kicker. That's the question they really need to be asking. So if you see anybody in the media that says, "Oh, you just take the Plaquenil, you're going to get those 2 things," just you know that they are lying to you. Turn that off. Don't watch them anymore. Don't read them anymore. They are lying to you. It's really clear. There's plain old liars. Now, if they're saying that in the sickest people, because you'll have 20% of people where the virus affects the heart as well, and those are the ones in the hospital with the shortness of breath, and they're looking at a ventilator. Um, in that population, you can see a level of arrhythmia, some people who get abnormal heart rhythms by combining the two. Now, we know that if you give 3 times the recommended dose, which they did in Brazil, you'll see the abnormal rhythms. Um, but that's crazy. There's no need to do that. So we're not seeing a whole lot yet at this point. But those people, and we know who they are, the ones who have had heart attacks and heart failure.
So those are people. Their option is take these drugs or likely a die. I mean,
Well, by the time you're on a
right,
ventilator, you're looking at either you take these drugs and you have a maybe 1/10 of or maybe a 1% chance of dying from the drugs, or you have a 50% chance of dying from the COVID.
right. How
So,
about, so Rita Wilson took these drugs, and
mm,
she could, Tom Hanks' wife. He had no problem with the drugs. I think they were both on them. She complained that it had extreme side effects: nausea, dizzy, and weak muscles.
nausea is the main side effect. Dizziness and weak muscles are probably more the virus and maybe killing off the virus.
Right.
But the main side effect would be nausea or diarrhea. And if that happens, then it's uncomfortable to stop it. But one of the main side effects of the virus is just what you described:
Right.
nausea, weak muscles, and dizziness,
Well,
achiness. So,
and the other thing that strikes me as funny is that, if you watch every TV commercial, they have a long list, if anyone listens, to all the things that every drug can do. So they're
mm,
making a big deal about the risks. And I'm the first one to get online to say take drugs last choice, not first choice. But
mhm.
in this case, they're making the biggest deal about these side effects. Every drug, everybody out there that's listening, you're likely on some prescription medication, and look and see what you're at risk for.
Yeah,
They're
Sarah, let me give them a simple
right.
perspective. If you take Motrin, ibuprofen, that family of medications, that whole NSAID group, kills about 50,000 Americans a year. You won't
You
hear
don't
a
hear
peep
that.
about that. And these are major studies of
Right.
over 500,000 people. Not a word on most media. And now, coincidentally, they happen to
What do
be
they
one
die
of the
from?
media's made. They die of a 35% increased risk of heart attack and stroke and
Hmm.
16,000 bleeding ulcer deaths a year. But not a word in the media because they're one of the major advertisers, is my suspicion. And you'll find that the media, one, if they are Democratic, and since Trump said it, they will just make up total nonsense. And I'm not saying that it works on both media sides. The right and left will do the same thing.
Everybody has their things.
They're all doing it. And if there's an advertiser, so Gilead is the third biggest pharmaceutical advertiser when I checked around a month last year. And Gilead is making the antiviral drug that's one of them that's being tested. So you will hear
This
the
new one,
media will sing
remdesivir.
its praises.
That's the remdesivir. I
Yes.
don't know how to pronounce it.
Yep. And
Okay,
neither do
so
I.
I want to
So
talk
that's the
about that
one.
in a sec. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me remind anybody, if anybody has any questions, type them on in. I've got a system set up here. Someone's going to text me because I was having a screen issue. So if you have questions about this for the doc or about any of this, then chime in and we'll ask it along. So one last thing on the the Plaquenil, say it that way, and the Z-Pak. When should people be taking it? So should everybody at first, or only if their symptoms get bad enough?
I recommend at first sign of symptoms of cough or shortness
Yeah.
of breath that people be on it. Vulnerable populations, I recommend even at the first signs of the sore throat, achiness, the headache. And basically, if they're having a fever, that's a bit of a late sign. I'm going to put them on it. And I'm not going to wait for the testing unless they have a test, which is a quick test. Basically, do whatever test that they have available because that's all you're going to have as an option. But if they have one that gives the results in an hour, which they're developing now, then I would wait on the hour to take it. If not, I would get the test. I would take it and get the test sometime in the next 2 days, because by day 3 or 4, you're likely no longer going to be contagious. So you want to do the test in the first day or two, so you can know if you did have it, so you can go out and play and not worry about it anymore.
All right. So there's a lot of debate about the availability of this drug. In some places, you have to go to a hospital. They're only allowing it in the hospital. They're talking about shortages, and yet the math doesn't add up to me because they've got, what I see, there's Sandoz was donating, it has a stockpile. 30 million doses were being donated by Sandoz. That's in addition to whatever was already stockpiled. And I don't even know if that's doses like for one person for the 7 days they need to take it, or divided by the 14 pills. But even
Yep.
then, for the amount of people that are sick right now, that should be plenty for who's currently got it. And yet people say they're having a hard time getting it. So what should people do to be able to get the drug?
Well, it's tricky because each state has their own guidelines, and it's a matter of availability. But they're sending more and more, and I've been trying to figure out if it's 50 million doses or 50 million people, pills or people. Like, no way for me to say. But the pharmacy should be getting it in. So basically, for the people that I'm treating, I'm just giving them a prescription to have on hand for if they get the symptoms, and then they call the pharmacy and they go ahead and check, and when it's available and the pharmacy says they can get it, then they should get it if they have the symptoms. But
And should anyone feel guilty that they're stealing it from someone that has lupus?
no,
Because that's the other headline. If if you give it to the people with COVID, then all the people that have autoimmune diseases that are taking it will be
you're look
deprived.
you are looking at 4 to 6 weeks of having the shortfall and not being available, but there's so much being produced because they've ramped up production
Right.
that should be readily
Right.
available again soon. And
Well, and again, they're
drugstores have
saying they have it in the stockpile.
they should be releasing that. I don't know what the politics are with that, but understand if you are taking Plaquenil for this rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, it stays in your body for 1 to 3 months. It's not going to stop working because you miss a dose. It's 1 to 3 months where it stays in the body and then gradually, fades out. So most of you will be fine for the 4 to 6 weeks that it may take to get it. And you're first in line when it does come to the pharmacy. They set it aside for you first now.
Right.
So that's going to be a very temporary thing that, although they're scaring people with it, should not be a big problem, even for those.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about that remdesivir, or however you pronounce it, the Gilead Labs. And I mean, it's early stage. What I really want to say in this, again, we've got, so the Plaquenil, these are drugs that have been around. They understand how they're used. What do people need to understand about a new drug? Because everybody's getting excited. There's a new drug that's being developed. And yet
Oh,
those
oh,
take
that,
years.
but Sarah, that's very exciting because a new drug is still covered under patents. You can charge whatever you want for it, and it's really
But
profitable. No, and we can
but it's not
advertise it.
safe.
Safe? Who cares a damn about
I
safe?
care. And
The-
everybody watching here cares.
Yeah, but not the media, not the
Okay.
politicians.
Right.
I'm
So
I'm teasing a bit
I
here.
know.
Okay, so
So, but seriously, I mean, because again, people are all excited about new drugs, new vaccines, and we'll talk about vaccine in a second. That new drugs, oh, it's going to save the day from this new disease. But to
no,
properly develop and properly test a drug takes years and years. Again, they're worried about the side effects of the Plaquenil. They have no idea about what's going to happen on these new drugs.
exactly so. No, we do have some idea. We know that they will charge. They're off the record saying $1,000 per dose. Now, I remember when they made the hepatitis drug, and I was all excited about the research coming out and saying this is great. And the company was saying we're going to make this really low cost for people and make it available for everybody, all the PR. And then they marked it at $100,000 per course per person.
Oh, sure.
So they don't have a good track record
Right.
here when they say, "Oh yeah, probably just be a thousand
Right.
dollars per person." No, it's not going to be that.
So this really, in reality, this is nothing that's happening anytime soon, is what
This
people
is
really
nothing
need to
that's
get their arms
happening
around.
soon.
Right.
It's not anything you would do unless you're in the hospital, because then they give it intravenous. It's not an early thing like the Plaquenil and Zithromax. It's something that if somebody comes in and they are basically looking ventilator bound, they should be on the medication just because you got a 50% chance of dying if that happens. May as
Right.
well
And
throw
again,
whatever you have at it. But
to
otherwise,
me,
no.
and to me, again, the black window, like that's something that can let us out of our house. I'll call it
Yes,
tomorrow, right? Not tomorrow, but
yes.
there's a treatment that's there. All right. Let me
But
ask you, how about go ahead.
well, remember, you talked about N aught, which is if one person gets into the
Hmm.
population who has the disease, how many people will they infect?
Hmm.
And when we're looking at about 2 to 3 now for the COVID, regular flu 2, once it goes under 1, then the virus peters out and it goes away, and that's when you can start coming off lockdown. So if somebody is contagious for 4 days, taking the Plaquenil and Zithromax, and 22 to 44 days without it, that drops that an odd number, the likelihood of being contagious, wow, way
Right.
down, and it allows us to come off lockdown.
Right. Okay. Now, how about they're talking about these plasma transfusions? Is that a realistic thing?
No, I
I
mean,
have an
because,
opinion, but
well, the thing is,
right.
it's not unreasonable if you're on a ventilator or on the way to dying, but we don't have enough people who have antibodies in their blood that even if we took blood from everybody and pooled it, it's extraordinarily expensive. There's no way they can get enough for more than just a few people, and I think it's going to be a modest benefit, but it's it's a Hail Mary.
Well, the thing that I was reading, because of the way what they're learning about the mechanism of the virus, that
Mhm.
it's not a respiratory disease. It's a iron and an O2 carrier disease.
It's both.
That right. So that the plasma only is a short term holdover because the blood itself is not able to carry the oxygen to the parts of the body.
Well, here's the thing. If you did a whole body blood transfusion, that would help until the virus breaks down that new blood.
Right.
So, but these are long shot things. They should be being studied. They should be looked at, but this is not something that's really going to help the population as a whole.
Right. It's not
Um,
realistic anyway to roll out with that in a significant number. Nobody's
yeah,
you can't
it's
get
not
the blood and
available.
you, right. I'm not everybody's going in for a transfusion.
Yeah, if 100 pounds of
Right.
gold could kill somebody, that would be nice. But there's not enough gold on the planet to get more than a small percent of
Right.
people. So, it's that's not a very reasonable thing. They are looking at other things, but there are other things like melatonin, where it's very early, but melatonin is dirt cheap and very safe. If I had the disease, I would be going up on it. I'd like to do a quick mention that to decrease the risk, to optimize immunity, I think is really important because most people don't get most infections that come around. And why? Because your immunity's up. So I just want to one sentence: zinc 15 milligrams a day, vitamin C 500, and vitamin D 1,000 units.
And
There
those will
is
help protect against
those
this. And why the
optimize your
yeah.
immunity so you're less likely to catch it,
And I
and stay
think those
hydrated.
amounts at those amounts like zinc 15 milligrams, that's pretty much in a multivitamin, right? 11 or
Um,
15.
there's a multivitamin I
Right.
recommend called the
Right.
Energy Revitalization System, where one scoop a day has all of that and 47 other things that really help optimize immunity and health and well-being. That's what I take myself. I'm not worried about the virus. I'm taking those things. I'm getting my sleep. I'm staying hydrated. I'm using reasonable precautions. If I do get it, I'm going to go on to Zithromax and Plaquenil. And even though I'm technically in the age group and the whole thing, I feel 31, but I was born 67 years ago. So, I'm in that age group. So technically I should be worried but I'm not worried about it because these are the things I've done. I feel well protected with it. I feel safe. And I'm just having a good time. Last night we were dancing to rock music with my honey on a patio, and that's because we're locked in and having fun with it. And
That's what builds your
it's
immune
not a big
defense.
deal. Well, the moon is very big in Hawaii. It was very nice.
Uh, all right, let's talk for a second about the. I have a couple questions, but I think we'll do the questions a little bit later on, or if they fit into the conversation at the moment. Let's talk about that vaccine for a second. Again, they're talking about, oh, we can't get out until there's a vaccine. Now, a vaccine, even if they discovered one today, they're not going to have it ready for a year and a half. I mean, is
Correct.
that really a realistic thing? And then, is that going to be a silver bullet? The flu vaccine, and again, understanding this isn't the flu, is what, on average 50% effective every year?
Yeah, the bottom line is that it's really good to be looking for the vaccine, waiting on the vaccine. You may as well just put a bullet to your head and go die now if you're going to wait on the vaccine. It's just a real bad social policy. Get the vaccine, have it, test it, see how safe or unsafe it is, see what percent of people get antibodies level enough to confer immunity, and then you figure it out. But waiting on the vaccine like it's a cavalry and the only thing that can save us, that's good PR for companies selling vaccines, but it's insanity.
Well, and again, I always get afraid, especially when they rush something to market,
Hmm.
because again, it takes a while. You need to thoroughly test it and know what the long-term
No, sorry, you don't,
effects are.
because of course you don't.
I do.
Because no, no,
I
no,
do.
because the companies are saying we will only do this if you grant us total immunity for anybody we kill with this. So no, they don't have
Because
to do
I'm not
that.
jumping on the front of that line.
No, I'm not
I
jumping on
think
the front
people,
of that
it's
line either.
truly, I mean, I always say this, and in general, when people get drugs or prescriptions, like always better, unless you absolutely, the older drugs aren't working, don't take the new drug.
Yeah,
Because the
older is
older ones
safer.
right, older is safer. They've got more experience. The new stuff, they don't have all the information. And same thing, I'm never jumping on the front of that vaccine line. Personally, other people make different choices depending on their health profiles. But
Yes,
you want to have a lot of experience out in the world before you go jump on that, unless you absolutely need it.
Yeah, I think we'll know. We can address that more once we see what it is and what the studies are showing with
Yeah.
it. Right now, we don't even know if people get immunity from the virus itself, let alone from the vaccine. And we don't know its mutation rate. It's too early to look to. That's a horse we don't have to be
Right.
evaluating for another year and a half. So right now, though, there's simple things you don't. You can really feel safe because you are safe. Simple measures: do the nutritional support, get your sleep, know that they find a doctor who will give the Zithromax and Plaquenil at first sign of the infection, and enjoy the time out a bit. Be reasonable, considerate. When you wear the face mask, that's not to protect yourself. Doesn't protect you. It keeps you from sneezing and aerosolizing in the air, so you're protecting other people. So my wife joked. She said, "Well, when we're wearing the mask, that's kind of our way of saying I love you because I'm wearing the mask to protect you." So I
That's
would
a
just take
lovely
that
way of
state of
thinking
mind
about
with
it.
it.
Yes.
You
So,
know,
hey, somebody asked, because we jumped past, you said melatonin was beneficial, but then we jumped past it. So why is melatonin beneficial?
there are a number of mechanisms that it has on immune function. It's really very, very early research suggesting that it may help this virus,
As
but
a treatment or as a preventative?
both. And so it costs what, 2 cents a pill, 5 cents a pill. I personally am taking the 5 milligrams at bedtime. I don't think the brand matters a whit. If I were to get the virus, I would up that to 5 milligrams 4 times a day.
Yeah. And melatonin has, like when people use it for sleep, since it's a
Mhm.
hormone based thing, that you have to adjust it. And is there any issue with adjusting it in this case? All right.
No.
And let me go back to vitamin C for a second, because one of the treatments they've talked about is high dose vitamin C.
Yes.
And that's intravenous in the hospital, not necessarily orally,
Both. So I have people take 500 milligrams a day now for protection.
just preventive.
At first sign of symptoms, I go up to 500 to 1,000 milligrams 4 times a day. If you start to get diarrhea, that's your body's way of saying that's more than we need. And it's not harmful, but it's just a nuisance, so cut back. You can push the dose if you got, especially with a buffered vitamin C, it's easier on the stomach. You can push it up as high as your body will take it without giving you diarrhea, because
Can
it's
I
your body.
overdose on vitamin C?
If you overdose, you're going to get the diarrhea, and and that's its way of saying it's not dangerous. It's
Right.
just a nuisance. Now, for intravenous vitamin C, I would be going with 10,000 to 25,000 milligrams IV, but that you'll need a holistic doctor, and they will know the dosing and the things they're comfortable with. But the other thing is licorice. Glycyrrhizin has been studied in hepatitis and a host of other uh, viruses, and shown to be incredibly effective. Um, so if I wouldn't take it now, but if for sinus symptoms, I'd be taking a cup or two of licorice tea each morning, unless people have uncontrolled high blood pressure. But intravenous glycyrrhizin is being studied in China now for the virus. I think that has a very high probability because it was effective, as my memory serves, in the other studies against other coronaviruses, as well as numerous other viruses. It's benign, it's cheap. And if you're seeing a holistic doctor who is giving the IV vitamin C, they can also probably give the IV glycyrrhizin. And that combo, is a one-two punch, I think, for the virus. I think that's an
Yeah.
important, and many hospitals are giving the IV vitamin C.
Yeah, I knew that they were doing it in the hospitals, which was huge for hospitals to be doing vitamin C. I thought that was enormous.
Hmm.
All right, let's talk about those tests. Because again,
Hmm.
it's kind of the two sides that everybody's hanging themselves on for being able to get out. They're saying
Hmm.
we need treatments, and then we need to be able to test everybody. And every day there's a different discussion of tests. First it was the nasal swabs. First it was the deep nasal swabs. Then it was the shallow nasal swabs. Now there's a saliva test that just got approved, I think yesterday. Um, and yet everybody's saying that there aren't enough tests. So what's working, what's not, what's of like, again, people are complaining that they're not able to get tests. I saw today that China's holding back sending tests that they were supposed to because of some trade regulations. Hello.
Yeah, in the beginning, there's a real problem with getting enough tests up and running quickly enough and getting access to it. That I think is being remedied. In terms of which test, it's going to boil down to what they have at the testing center you're going to. More importantly, is where do you get tested? If you have to walk into a room full of people hacking and coughing to get the test, I wouldn't. But if you have a drive-through you can go through, that's fine. And I would just go to any place that has a drive-through where you don't have to be sitting in crowds of sick people.
And they
And
talked about false negatives and false positives.
Every
Again,
test, every test out there in existence pretty much has false negatives and false positives. Even the pregnancy tests, all of them have both. Um,
do these
and
have a
it's
higher rate of it?
a little bit, but not high enough that I would really think twice about doing it or relying on the results of it. I mean, I would still, if I had the cough and shortness of breath and tested negative, I would still be on the Zithromax and the Plaquenil anyway. Having any of those symptoms, fever, cough, shortness of breath, I tell people go on the medications and then do the test, so you'll know later. And at that point, since you're already on the medication, it doesn't matter if the test is right or wrong.
Yeah,
And
but
it's close enough for accuracy to tell you later if you're immune,
again, assuming you can get the medication, assuming the
assuming you
doctors.
can get the
I
medication.
think I heard, and I don't know if this has changed, but as of last week in New York, if you weren't in the hospital, the doctors couldn't use it directly. They couldn't. You
But
could. The
they're
doctor's
flooding,
office couldn't.
but it's rapidly coming in. Yes, they did have that, and or unless you had a positive test is actually what it was. You needed proof of a positive
Right.
test
Right.
for New York. So the the bottom line is the test doesn't matter if it's not accurate by 1%. If it's 99 or 95% accurate, that's enough for what you're needing here because you're not basing treatment decisions on it. You're just trying to get a sense of things and know for the future.
How important is it going to be for, I'll call it everybody to get tested, like do the census, right? Are we going to need 350 million people to get tested for this so that everybody can understand now the incidence of it in the population?
Well, if they do a sample here and there of 500 to 1,000 people, they'll know what percent are immune, and then they can run the numbers from that. So people can do it or not as they prefer. It's kind of like, do you want to know the sex of your baby before it's born? It'll be a matter, in my opinion, of personal preference. So you can know whether you're at risk again, so you don't have to, so you can feel totally
Right.
safe if you're positive, and you can feel reasonably safe just with the common sense stuff we gave today, even if you're not immune yet.
Now they're talking about a new test, a blood antibody test.
Mm.
And there was a new thing that was announced today. Abbott Labs has an IgG antibody test.
Yeah, not very
Um,
helpful for the short term now
right.
because it doesn't turn positive on many people for until after the bug is done.
It's
But
delayed. It
it'll,
takes a while for that to
yeah.
show, right? So tell people what IgG, the two antibodies do.
These are basically your body's immune system. So you can think of the IgG as the army. It takes them a while to gear up, move everybody, and in 4 to 6 weeks they're in place, but then they stand guard. The IgM are the shock troops. These are the ones who go now. For the first a week or two of the infection, they go in, they learn how to fight the infection, they learn how to kill it, they get rid of it. Those are your Marines, and you're going in. And then the IgG are just the ground troops that you train them for this enemy. This is how they attack. Here's how you kill them.
And they'll protect you
And
long into the future.
right, so
Right.
that way they can't invade you again. That's what immunity is.
Right. So
IgG means you're now immune to that bug.
right. So these new tests, though, so this new Abbott Labs, which is just IgG, you would have to get that later. That's not going to be an immediate test. Speaking of, you could get a false negative, right?
Yeah, it's just that's later after this is passed in this first wave to tell you if you're immune.
Right.
That's all, and that's handy. I'm probably will do that just for why not.
Okay, I had a couple other questions from people. Let's see. Wait, if you do show that you have immunity, would it be a lifetime, a few years, only a year? So
No,
if your
nope.
IgG is permanent, or if you positive for IgG, are you now immune like you had chickenpox?
It probably won't be long term. We don't know if it'll be at all, because the problem is these viruses continue to mutate. That's why you
Like
can
the
be
flu?
immune to the flu of 2019 and not be immune to the flu of 2020. We don't know how this one's going to mutate. We also don't know if they're even going. There are people who are become infected or at least shed virus after the infection's gone. So we don't know if they can even reinfect, if it even gives enough immunity to protect this specific strain of virus. So the proper answer is we don't know. We are hoping that it will give at least several years or maybe longer term immunity.
Gotcha. Okay. Someone asked earlier about whether smokers were more likely to get corona. And I guess a question about smokers. And then are there any other profiles? I heard that obesity actually is a big cofactor for risk.
Well, the main risk, smoking, maybe. The main risks that we've seen are diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, and underlying heart disease in terms of having a heart attack or heart failure at the time. Those are the four horsemen here.
So it's really interestingly, again, because we said this isn't a respiratory infection, it's not necessarily a lung thing. it's a body
Well,
strength thing that's putting you more.
it's a lung infection, and body-wide infection, including the gut. But it has more to do with how you're built than how the virus is built in terms of how you're going to do. So if you give yourself what you need for your body to be strong and healthy, the virus is likely to pass by your door, never infect you, or you have a mild infection that you didn't even know you had it, and be gone.
Which is
So
very encouraging. And many people, as we know, had that happen to them.
yeah,
We just don't know
and
who.
yeah, and just to take a good multi with a zinc and 500 of C, get your sleep. It's just common sense stuff. It's not big deal stuff.
Great.
It's
Okay.
it's easy.
All right. So let me give everybody some more information on a couple things. First of all, thank you, Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum.
You're
Your
welcome.
website, Vitality 101, they can get all sorts of information from you about you and the work that you do. Bottom Line has published a free downloadable immune boosters book, which some of the great tips from all sorts of our doctors, Dr. Teitelbaum and other doctors. You can do that, get that for free. Literally, that's all. We just want you healthy at bottomlineinc.com/immune boost. And Jake and I are going to be back on Monday, this coming Monday at 2:00, and we're going to be talking more about immune boosting strategies.
Mhm.
So mark your calendars, come on back. And thank you so much. Thank you, Jake. Have a great, great day.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Be well.
Thanks.